There's a sentence published by the Washington Post on Friday, March 6th, sourced to 3 American officials. That changes every assumption analysts, investors, and governments have made about this war since February 28th. It is not about Iran. It is not about Israel. It is not about missiles or interceptors, or the Strait of Hormuz. It is about Russia. Russia is providing Iran with real-time intelligence on the locations of American warships and aircraft, satellite imagery, movement data, precise coordinates of U.S. naval assets operating across the Middle East theater. One official described it as a pretty comprehensive effort. Not occasional, not passive. Comprehensive. Ongoing, active. Read that again slowly. This war, which the White House called a clean, decisive operation against Iran, is now a proxy conflict between the United States and Russia. Fought with Iranian missiles on the soil and water of 6 Gulf nations, using American soldiers as targets, America is not fighting Iran. America is fighting Iran equipped with Russian eyes. And here is what that changes everything. The military logic of Operation Epic Fury rested on one advantage America assumed it held: information dominance. The idea that America knows where everything is, what everything is doing, and what is coming next, that advantage is the force multiplier behind every carrier strike group, every B-2 sortie, every Patriot battery. You don't just need better weapons, you need to know where to point them. If Russia's satellite constellation is feeding Iran a live picture of exactly where American ships are moving, exactly which aircraft are on which flight path, exactly which positions U.S. forces are occupying, then America's information dominance isn't an advantage anymore. It is an illusion. Russian satellites are dismantling it one targeting packet at a time. Now connect this to the question haunting every military analyst since day 2 of this war. How was Iran hitting targets it shouldn't have been able to find? The THAAD radar in Jordan, a classified position, moved regularly, surrounded by operational security. The command and control hub in Bahrain, embedded in a civilian district, not on any public map. The shipping container at Port Shaybah, a dispersal location specifically chosen because command believed it was off the grid. Targets that should have been invisible to Iranian intelligence, hit with a precision that felt like someone had handed Tehran a map. Someone did. His name is Vladimir Putin, and on Friday, the same day the Washington Post published, he called Iranian President Pezeshkian, and according to Russian state news agency TASS, they agreed to continue contacts, the diplomatic language of an alliance that has just been publicly exposed and is not apologizing for it. Now let's add the China dimension that the same intelligence reporting surfaced simultaneously, because it sits right next to the Russia revelation, and the American public has not yet fully absorbed what both mean. U.S. intelligence agencies have assessed that China may be preparing to provide Iran with financial assistance. Spare parts and missile components, not confirmed yet. Preparation. But the source was precise. 3 people familiar with the intelligence, and the framing was not speculative. China relies heavily on Iranian oil. China is worried about the Hormuz closure. But China is also calculating that a prolonged, costly American military engagement in the Middle East accelerates every strategic objective Beijing has been pursuing for 15 years, draining interceptor stockpiles that would otherwise face China in the Pacific, fracturing the Gulf financial relationships that underpin dollar dominance, demonstrating to the global South that American security guarantees come with catastrophic collateral attached. One American official said it plainly: China is more cautious in its support. It wants the war to end because it endangers their energy supply. Translation: China wants the war to end on terms that hurt America. It is managing that outcome carefully, from a distance, with deniable financial instruments. And while Russia does the noisier work of feeding Iran targeting data, this is not a regional war anymore. This is a great power confrontation wearing a regional war's clothes. Let's talk about what Day 7 and 8 look like on the ground. Because the Pentagon is now claiming something that should make every person watching this ask a very uncomfortable question. The U.S. says Iran's ballistic missile attacks have fallen by 90% since Day 1, drone attacks down 83%, B-2 bombers dropped dozens of 2,000-pound bombs on buried Iranian ballistic missile launchers. Israel claims 80% of Iran's air defense systems destroyed. 2,500 strikes with more than 6,000 weapons fired. These numbers are extraordinary, and they may even be true. But here's the question those numbers do not answer. If Iran's launch capacity is genuinely down 90%, why did the IRGC announce its 23rd wave of strikes on Day 7? Why did Iran launch a combined drone and missile attack on Tel Aviv on Thursday night? A cluster warhead visibly breaking apart above central Israel, filmed on 100 phones? Why did Saudi Arabia intercept 3 ballistic missiles targeting a base south of Riyadh on Friday? Why did Qatar report a fresh barrage of Iranian missiles and drones with explosions heard across Doha? On Day 7 of a war that was supposed to be over in 4 to 5 weeks, 90% degraded, and still launching Wave 23, still reaching Tel Aviv, still hitting Gulf capitals. What does 100% look like, and how long does it take to get there? There is a number that UNICEF published on Friday, March 6th, that no Pentagon press conference has addressed, and no Trump Truth social post has acknowledged. 181. That is the number of children confirmed killed in Iran since February 28th, according to UNICEF. Not a number from Iranian state media, not a number from a hostile government source. UNICEF, the United Nations agency whose entire institutional purpose is counting dead children so the world cannot pretend they don't exist. 181 children in 7 days. That is more than 25 children per day, more than 1 child per hour. In a war that the White House press secretary described as the work of a man of action. And here is where the human cost intersects with the strategic calculation in a way that the Pentagon's targeting briefings are not built to process. A crowd of thousands gathered in Tehran on Friday for prayers and rallied against the American bombing campaign. These are not IRGC hardliners mobilized by state coercion, though some surely were. These are ordinary Iranians, people who in January 2026 were protesting their own government in the streets, people who in February were watching their foreign minister say a historic agreement was within reach, people who in late February heard Trump say he would decide who their next supreme leader would be. There is a sentence from Iran's foreign minister Araghchi, published Friday, that captures what 181 dead children and 7 days of bombing has done to the diplomatic landscape. He said Trump betrayed diplomacy. He said Iran has no reason to negotiate with the U.S. He said Washington cannot be trusted. 2 days earlier, CNN reported that Iranian intelligence had sent a back-channel signal suggesting possible openness to talks. Trump publicly confirmed Iran had sought to make a deal. That channel appears to be closed now. The closure matters because it removes the last off-ramp that didn't require someone to announce their own defeat. Without back channels, wars end with unconditional surrender. Exactly what Trump posted on Truth Social on Friday. No deal with Iran except unconditional surrender. Unconditional surrender, the demand made to Japan in August 1945 after 2 atomic bombs, applied to a country of 90 million people with a military that is currently executing Wave 23 of its retaliatory campaign, with Russian satellite support, and whose ground forces are waiting for a U.S. ground invasion, ready to kill and capture thousands of American troops, in the words of Supreme National Security Council Secretary Ali Larijani. These 2 things cannot both be true simultaneously. Either Iran is on the verge of collapse and unconditional surrender is realistic, or Iran is executing Wave 23 with Russian support, and unconditional surrender is a fantasy that is buying time for the interceptor stockpile to collapse. Every person in a position of real military authority, not the press conference authority, the operational authority, knows which one of these is true. Let's talk about the cost, because the Center for Strategic and International Studies published its estimate on Thursday. It is a number that the American public has not yet been asked to sit with. The first 100 hours of Operation Epic Fury cost $3.7 billion, $891 million per day. And $3.5 billion of that, 94%, was not budgeted. It is being funded through emergency supplemental authorization or drawn down from existing accounts, ways that create holes in the defense budget that will take years to fill. $891 million per day for a war that Trump says could last 4 to 5 weeks. 4 weeks is 28 days. 28 times $891 million is $24.9 billion unbudgeted, unfunded. And simultaneously, Brent crude is at $91 a barrel, the highest since October 2023. Oil supertanker rates hit an all-time high this week. Japan is rationing its strategic reserves. European gas futures doubled and are rising again. Every dollar of oil price above $80 is a tax on every economy on Earth that imports energy, which is every economy that is not Saudi Arabia or Russia. The people paying that tax are not the people who made the decision to launch Operation Epic Fury. They are the Filipino domestic worker in Dubai, the Bangladeshi construction laborer who cannot access his payroll because the AWS data center running his employer's payments is still offline, the Indian family in Mumbai paying 30% more for petrol than they were paying on February 27th. There is something happening inside the American political system right now that the White House is trying to manage and failing. 20,000 Americans have already left the Middle East. The State Department is arranging charter flights for those who haven't. Secretary Rubio urged all remaining American citizens to leave immediately. And yet the same Rubio, in the same week, told reporters that American and Israeli air forces will take apart this terroristic regime in the next hours and days. You cannot simultaneously be evacuating your civilians and telling the world you are on the cusp of decisive victory. One of those statements is public relations. The other is a logistical reality. The planes leaving Doha and Dubai and Manama are the logistical reality. Here is what day 8 looks like from the position of every government that is not America or Israel or Iran. Britain, France, and Spain have agreed to provide military support to protect Allied interests. Canada's Prime Minister said he cannot categorically rule out participation. NATO's Secretary General called Iran's attacks unacceptable and said Europe is supportive. And yet Iran's foreign minister has now explicitly warned that any European country providing military support will be considered a legitimate target. Spain refused to allow the U.S. to use its bases for the war. Trump threatened to cut off all trade with Spain. The NATO alliance that has never fought a combat operation against a Middle Eastern state is now fracturing publicly over a war none of its members were consulted about before it started. Not a single European government was briefed before the bombs fell on February 28th. And Russia is providing targeting data to the side that is shooting at NATO's nuclear weapons storage facility in Turkey. Connect those two facts and sit with what they mean for Article 5, for the credibility of the alliance, for every deterrence calculation every European defense ministry has built its security architecture on for 77 years. Trump said, unconditional surrender. Russia said, we'll continue contacts. Iran launched Wave 23. UNICEF counted 181 children. CSIS invoiced $891 million per day. The interceptors keep depleting. The tankers stay anchored. The back channel went dark. And somewhere in a situation room in Moscow, the smartest people in Putin's orbit are looking at a map of the Middle East and doing arithmetic that has nothing to do with Iran. And everything to do with Ukraine and Taiwan and the price of oil and the patience of European governments, and the question of how long a superpower can bleed from 100 small wounds before the bleeding becomes the story. Russia gave Iran a map. The map has American ships on it. And day 8, those ships are still moving, but they are no longer moving unseen. Share this video to every contact you have right now. Russia confirmed providing Iran with real-time satellite intelligence on U.S. warships and aircraft. A pretty comprehensive effort, per U.S. officials. China preparing financial and military component assistance per CIA intelligence. UNICEF confirmed 181 children killed in Iran in 7 days. Iran launched Wave 23 of strikes, despite Pentagon claiming 90% degradation. Operation Epic Fury costs $891 million per day, 94% unbudgeted. Brent crude at $91, 20,000 Americans evacuated. Trump demands unconditional surrender. Iran says no reason to negotiate. The back channel is closed. Day 8, and America is no longer fighting alone against Iran. It is fighting Iran with Russian eyes.